All right, XPTers, how's it going? We got Beau Brown with us today. I'm sure most of you probably already know Beau. I think Beau has probably sent a lot of people to XPT, and XPT thanks you, Beau, for that. Um, so Beau does the Puckin Fuppet show, which happens, what, about every 3 to 4 months now? Something like
Uh, it's kind of clustered in one part of the year. It's sort of October through February. So it's October, December, February. So it's kind of around the end of the beginning of the year, and then it's Dragon Con season during
It's
the summer.
DragCon, which
Yeah,
brings us to your next thing, which is the Puppet Talk or Puppet, what is it?
track.
Track, thank you. Puppet Track, which is in cahoots with Dragon Con, and you've been doing that for how many years now?
I think this will be the 12th or 13th year of the program.
Wow, that's incredible. And then you also have your own puppet filming company as well,
Mhm.
correct? And
Yep,
what
New
is it
Puppet
called?
Order with Sam and Daryl. Yeah,
Yeah, awesome. Um,
which has been
but
a part of XPT. Uh,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. So let's step back just for a second. I want to start with something that is maybe puppet adjacent, and that is He-Man.
Yeah. I
So,
didn't set up my camera in front of any of my He-Man stuff. I decided to play it cool.
so I know that you are a pretty big He-Man collector,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting to me only because I don't I believe that I'm probably maybe a decade or so older than you are. And I remember He-Man being popular when I was still kind of into cartoons. It was right at that cusp of where my age was starting to kind of get out of cartoons
Mhm.
and collecting figures. Um, and I would probably guess you would have been more on the side of the Ninja Puppet when all that started. Um,
On the side of Ninja Puppet,
I'm sorry,
Ninja
Ninja
Turtles.
Turtles.
Ah, yes.
I'm thinking
Uh,
of Raymond right now. But anyways, go on. Sorry.
he's just knocking around in there, living rent
I
free in
know,
your
right?
head. I'm going to let him know.
Can't get rid of them.
Actually, the I segued pretty seamlessly between He-Man and Turtles because I was attracted to both properties for pretty much the exact same reasons.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was something that you came into a little bit later or if it just kind of extended right into.
I mean, I was pretty much, I mean, I was six when um, I was born in 79. So
Okay.
I was right there at the beginning of the 80s through the whole, pretty much through the whole thing from 1 to 10. So, um, yeah, so the He-Man stuff was this crazy ensemble cast of wacky characters. And I think part of what attracted me to it was also that there were like grotesque good guys. Whereas a lot of stuff had like, oh, all the pretty human people are the good guys, and then all the monsters and mutants are the bad guys. And I liked that He-Man had more monstrous characters that were good guys too. I thought that was neat and a good message. And then big wacky ensemble cast of characters, He-Man and all of his crazy friends. Same thing with Ninja Turtles, really wide variety of characters. Like all GI Joe, they're all army guys. Transformers, they're all robots. But He-Man and Ninja Turtles, like it's all sorts of crazy stuff. So I think that's
Yeah, and you kind of hit my bread and butter with G.I. Joe and Transformers. That's definitely why I grew up with and what I had the most of, besides probably Star Wars, of course.
yeah.
Um, but I almost think that that is kind of a way to introduce yourself to the idea of making something inanimate come alive with your own
100%.
imagination and
Yeah.
whatnot. Do you see that as a correlation between how you go from being into He-Man and He-Man collector into eventually getting into puppetry?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was always a hands-on play kind of kid, big imagination stuff. Um, and so, I started role playing, like playing tabletop role playing games at a very young age. So I just had a very active cinematic imagination. And it's weird because I've played with people who have no mind's eye, which I just don't get it. Like I don't like, well, what's going on in your head when we play? You know, like I've got this whole movie going on. I can see all the stuff, and they're just like, well, I don't see anything. I'm like, what's going on? You know, like, oh no, it's more like ideas and feelings. I'm like, okay, but how do you like how do you know what you're doing? I don't know. So it's wild. But anyway, so I just have always thought really vividly, and so I think making the jump from action figures playing out stories, I mean that's what puppetry is. It's telling stories with objects, and that's what we did as kids. And yeah, segues right into wanting to, you start with toys, you're telling something else's story. Oh, I'm telling the story of He-Man with my He-Man toys. And then you can get older, and then you can start, and even back then, I would have toys from other toy lines, and I would play with them all together, and I was making up my own stories with the toys. And then you go from making up stories with toys to making your own toys to tell stories with, which is what puppets are. So, yeah.
And did you grow up as an only child, or did you have siblings?
I had a younger sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you guys play at all, or was guys
Yeah,
different
yeah,
age in that
some
sense?
definitely. She had a couple of Shearer figures,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take me to the jump. I assume it's going to be a jump from collecting toys into puppetry for the first time. How's that happen?
Well, I hadn't really started collecting toys again when I got into puppetry. I had my toy, interests as a kid, and then they pretty much sort of petered off after Ninja Turtles wound down. And then I would get something, every now and then if there was something I like, but I wasn't a collector for sure.
Okay.
I didn't start collecting again until the 2000s when Cartoon Network put out the new He-Man 2000X, what we say 2000X cartoon. And that got me into collecting toys again. And this is pre or proto internet. So, you couldn't just order things on the internet. You would, that was back when you still got in your car and drove to all the local Toys R Us's and Walmarts and actually had to hunt for toys instead of just, buying them on Amazon or buying them, whatever. But I interned at the Center for Puppetry Arts my senior year of high school. And so and I was very heavily involved in theater as a kid. And so I pretty much went into my senior year, had the opportunity to take an internship through the school's gifted program. And I decided to pick the center and ended up working there and met Chris Brown. He became my mentor, met Susan Kinney. I watched John Ludwig's rehearsals. I was there when they were doing The Body Detective and Winnie the Pooh. I got my background for theatrical or puppetry theater vocabulary, sitting in on the rehearsals and watching John work and watching the puppeteers work. And then I decided that I wanted to get more on the construction side of things. And so I ended up down in the shop with Chris and kind of found my vibe there with him, and built Winnie the Pooh and some stuff for the Body Detective. And yeah, and so for me it was a natural progression from as a theater kid who was a performer and a theater kid who was a designer. That's what puppets are. I mean, it's characters and making them and performing them. And so that's what attracted me, I think, to the puppets, was the storytelling potential. The idea of telling stories that aren't about people. Every play ever is about freaking people. Like like, oh my God, humans again. Oh, what a surprise.
Sure.
And so I love that puppetry sort of opens that storytelling potential up.
That's really interesting. I didn't know you had such a rich theater background there. So did you know about the center? Obviously, at some point you found out about because you applied to be a part of it, but how
Yeah,
soon
I'm
before
local.
that?
I went on field trips to the center as a kid. I saw Alice in Wonderland. My grandparents took me, and I wasn't like a lifer puppeteer. I mean, I guess I got started, in high school. That's pretty young, but I wasn't like infatuated with the Muppets. I wasn't going to, P of A meetings. I wasn't like, I didn't jump into puppetry that way. I really jumped into it through theater.
Yeah.
I wasn't like obsessed with puppets as a kid, and like I didn't come at it from that angle. I always came at it from as a theatrical tool, for sure.
Wow. That's so interesting to me because I've lived in Georgia all my life, just on the outskirts of Atlanta, and um, never went to the center. The schools never took me. So I didn't even know about the center
Oh, yeah.
until much, much later, like maybe 2000s.
Oh well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I remember seeing in the newspaper like ads for Rex Rocket and stuff, like back the during the days of John's wacky years, when he was doing the really wild stuff. Um, I don't think I ever went and saw any of the adult shows, but I remember my first XBT, as when I was a senior, was Chris had a piece in it called Static, and it was so rad. Um, and I think that was really my first exposure to short form, and seeing that really, because I didn't get involved in puppet slams until I got out of college and came back to Atlanta, and that's when the slams were running at Dad's at that point. And hooked back up with Chris when I got back out of college, and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing these crazy puppet slam things at this theater. You should come and get involved." And thankfully, I was sort of grandfathered in by Chris, and did my first puppet slam piece, and that was never left. Stayed right there.
yeah, there's really something about the shorter form that makes it a lot more accessible to
Yeah,
the
100%.
person
Yeah.
who's getting into it for first time, for sure.
Yeah. And
Uh,
that's the lesson sort of that I learned about puppet slams at that time. And the Dad's Garage Slam was relatively frequent. I mean,
it was like
between
every
the
month,
Dad's Garage
wasn't it?
Slam, sorry,
Wasn't it every month?
it
Once a
was,
month?
well, there was that and Late Night Creepy Horror Theater, which a lot of us performed in both. And yeah, there were a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so it was an extremely productive time, because we were just making new stuff all the time. And I remember specifically making the choice to create stock characters, because I was like, I can't keep building like high, like levels of complicated puppets, because we do these shows so often. I need to create a couple of characters that I can write lots of shows about, because I just don't have time to build new stuff every time. And so that's where Crack Rabbit and Bear came from, as these sort of trickster authority figure kind of character tropes that me and Nate and Matt could write lots and lots of shows about. And so that's what we did. And it was, I found sort of my comedic voice. I found the sort of humor that I enjoyed, and I really valued what that slam provided as a cultural, as a community service. It was a deadline, right?
Yeah.
And so the Puckin Puppet Show, I want to carry on that tradition of the show exists as a public service to give you a deadline, to give you a reason to put a show together and do stuff, because that's how I learned. And wanting to continue to have that outlet in the community is important to me, because the XPT is only once a year,
Yep.
and so having something that happens more frequently that you can just kind of throw stuff at. And I'd like to think that the bar is lower, that there's a XPT, you've got a lot more time, you've got some money, you've got support from mentors. And I think that the Puckin Puppet Show, I hope that I encourage, like, just get up there and try it. Just get up there and try it, environment to give people a place where the stakes are, hopefully a little lower, and you do feel comfortable getting up there and giving it a shot.
Yeah. Um, it must have been helpful with all your role-playing games to be able to then come up with an idea to have a serial storyline
Mhm.
going from one puppet show to the next and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
loose storyline, and
so sure, sure,
there's not
sure.
a ton of continuity in the Crack Rabbit Bear universe.
Sure, sure. Um, so since we already kind of mentioned, so Dad's was doing their thing, and like you said, I mean, it was just going, going, and then uh, Carolyn Mascalay decided to
Correct.
start a show, but she wanted to kind of take it out more to the public, get it a little bit more away or a little more removed away from the theater.
Mhm.
and take it to the bars. She thought
Yep.
it'd be something interesting for bars to have and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that history at all?
Yeah, so Caroline started the Puck and Fuppet show, and it was at a bar called the Ice House. And I went and I did my gay horse show, and the Caroline show established the format for the show as it still exists now. That it was competitive, that the audience voted at the end of the show, and you won cash prizes for for whoever won. Although Caroline made statues, there were not statues, they were like trophies. I still have, I
I
still have the
still have
trophy.
mine.
You have your trophy too?
I still have mine. Yeah.
I still got mine. Yeah, it's in my workshop. Yeah, and so it was fun, and so we won the first show, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great outlet, and because it was another place where I could take a show that I developed at the Dad's Garage Slam, get it in front of a different audience, maybe have learned something about it at the Dad show, tightened it up, and then did it again. And so it was really great to have another venue to do a slam piece at, because other than traveling to other, and I wasn't really traveling at that point. I hadn't really joined the larger puppet community at that point. It took a couple of years after I got back when Chris and I went to the Southeastern Regional Puppeteers of America festival in like Greenville, South Carolina, or somewhere. And that's when I met Madison and Valerie and Keith, and really sort of got my first real taste of the larger puppetry community. And then the PA Bay festivals happened in Atlanta 2 years, 2 years in a row. So all the puppeteers came to Atlanta, and so then by then I was definitely heavily in the community, and then through the PA Bay festivals, Lucky hosted the late night entertainment at the first PA Bay festival in Atlanta, and then I did it the second time. And so by doing that, I was suddenly out there in front of everybody, and that's when I kind of like made my name, sort of in the larger community as the host of those shows, which I still do now. So I still do the National Puppet Slam at the festivals.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. Carolyn maybe was in charge of it for a year, maybe a year and a half before she moved to France.
Correct. Her parents opened a bread and breakfast in the country, beautiful countryside of France. She got her own little pet unicorn named Pierre that lives in her pocket. All of her dreams came true, and she flew away to France. And so she said, "Hey, does anybody want to keep the show going?" I don't know if she like emailed a handful of people or just like, I mean, this is pre-Facebook even. I think that, like she may have made like a live journal post about it or something,
Right, yeah.
And I said, yeah, I think it's important, I'd love to. And so I did. And so that's why the show is called that. I didn't name it that. That's why the show has the competitive format. And that's how it's been all this time. So here
And
we
and
are.
you and you try to keep true for a little while there of keeping it at some bars, but then move to some theaters, right? How did that
The
change
show
happen?
has the show has moved many times. I
Yes.
think the show has been in like 12 different venues by this point. Yeah, we started at Lenny's, new Lenny's, not old Lenny's. We started at new Lenny's, and and at that point, it was really like a stand-up kind of stage. There weren't chairs, right? So if you weren't funny, people just like turned around and walked back to the
Yeah.
bar. Like you had to really hold their attention. It wasn't like, oh, we're sitting down now, the lights go down,
Yep.
like no, people are talking and moving around,
Yep.
and that's when, oh man, and that's when the ventriloquist guy came to the theater early that one time, and he was like, hey, do you run this puppet show? And I said, yeah, and he had his portfolio. His name was Maurice. Did you ever see Maurice perform?
I don't think I had, no.
The ventriloquist guy?
Uh,
Yeah, so he comes in and he's got this portfolio, and it's all these news clippings, and it's him like opening for James Brown and opening for like all these huge Motown acts and all this kind of stuff. And he's a ventriloquist.
wow.
And I'm like, yeah, you want to be in the show? That's amazing. And so yeah, he got up there and he just did this like incredibly raunchy, ventriloquist act. It was your normal ventriloquist, like, oh, the puppet's saying crazy stuff, whoa, kind of stuff. But it was the first time like another puppeteer really from another part of the puppetry community found the show and came to it. It wasn't sort of like, oh, it's the usual suspects from the sort of normal scene. So that was really exciting. And that was back then. I didn't host the show. I would bring in a guest host, usually a stand-up comedian or somebody that I knew, and they would run the show while I would stage manage it.
Oh,
And
okay.
over time, I found that they just didn't understand enough of what they were introducing
Sure.
to really be engaged hosts. And so at that point, I made the choice to move into hosting and bring on a stage manager. I knew I couldn't do both. And so I brought Whitney on, my friend Whitney from my old theater friend from middle school and high school, Whitney Carnes, who was also my assistant director at Dragon Con Puppetry Track. She's my technical director. So Whitney and I have been making theater together for a very, very, very long time.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and so had and then brought Crispy in as tech, and Crispy's been our technician for years and years and years now. And that's sort of the team. It's me and Katie and Crispy putting the show together. Yeah, so I started hosting the show, and then I could kind of talk the audience into like, well, here, like I could comment on what you're seeing, like, oh, this is this kind of puppetry, and or this artist, I love this artist because I first saw them, blah 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 blah, and I have personal stories about the artists, and then the guest artists that I bring in. That was the part of the show that I added.
Yeah.
Was I added the guest artist sort of ringer. Because when I then started getting plugged into that larger puppetry community and started getting the grant money for the show, I really wanted to make more connections. And as I traveled around meeting other puppeteers and being like, oh, wow, I love your stuff. I'd love for, the puppetry community back in Atlanta to see this. And so I started using the show as a way to bring guest artists into town so that the locals could see what they're doing and hopefully spend some time with them backstage and learn something about their style and because the Atlanta Slam does have a particular vibe, right? I've been to lots of different public slams around the country, and Atlanta has always sort of leaned toward comedy. It's leaned towards shorter rather than longer short form puppetry because we have a larger density of puppeteers. Most other slams have just a smaller pool of puppeteers to pull from. So like specifically Phoenix tends to have like 5 or 6 shows, but they're longer. They tend to go about 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay.
Which to me is like, oh geez, that's forever.
Yeah.
We're out 12 minutes. But that's there, that's there. And it's, to my knowledge, we're the only competitive slam that's out there. The rest are all more, every slam's different. Every slam is sort of like a thing, like a thumbprint of the puppetry community that it represents. So they're all different, but for the most part, most of them are more curated. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna book you 8 acts. I've seen all 8 of these shows, and we're gonna put on this show, and that's gonna be the show. And we're gonna have the money, and the money is gonna get divided 8 ways or 9 ways or whatever. But because the Puckin Puppet Show was this sort of competitive open mic night when it started, I never know how many pieces are going to be in the show.
Right.
It's always, to this community's credit, of all the years that I've been doing this, there was only one show where we didn't have enough acts show up.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we were at the Basement Theater, that tiny little place that was out in the middle of nowhere, and nobody liked to go there. It was too hard to find. And
A Star's place, right?
Yeah. And it had like a 60-person capacity. It was just this, it was so tiny. And I think it was actually Friday the 13th. It was Friday the 13th that Friday, or it was that Saturday. And so we didn't have enough show. we had like maybe 5 acts. And I was like, all right, well, we've got to have more because there's people paid to see a show. And so we got everybody backstage before the show, and everybody sort of put all the puppets they had like on the ground. And we were like, all right, we have to write shows now. And we wrote like 3 more bits based just sort of loosely around the theme of Friday the 13th. We're like, well, what do we got? Okay, Friday the 13th, go. And we used the puppets that we had, and we sort of squeezed out 3 more shows, padded out the show enough, and saved the day. The scrappy puppeteers saved the day. But the fact that out of all the years of doing a show, that's the only time that the community didn't just totally deliver the goods, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
It's amazing as you've kind of jumped from one theater to the next, as theaters have been closing down, a lot of them that you've been at. You finally arrived at the center, which seems almost like a no duh that it should have been there all along. How did that finally happen?
Uh, it it happened because the center asked me for the show. They are they're having a sort of initiative of saying that if it's puppetry in Atlanta, we want it to be, the center wants, you know, either to be here, physically here, or for the center to be involved. And I needed a new venue. The Village Theater had closed down the venue that we were at for the last many years. We were there for quite a while. Before that, we were at Fabrifaction, which was a really big theater, and so that show had a very different vibe.
Yeah, it was really a really nice theater. Really
yeah,
nice.
It was a very nice theater. It's now out front, and it's still a very nice theater. And so then we sort of scaled back down at the Village, and and it was like a little, it was a little improv theater, and it was scrappy, and it was the space was just right, and then that's where we were through the pandemic and sort of coming back after that and everything. But so when the Village closed, they got new ownership, and they basically doubled the rental fees. And I was like, this is too much. I don't want to, this is too much. So I was in the market for a new venue. The center reached out to me, and I said, all right, well, interesting idea. Let's, make me an offer, and we'll see. And so we came to an agreement on the offer, and we had our first show there, was the Halloween show. And it was great. And we had a great turnout. And, it was after performance of Ghastly. And so people who had seen Ghastly stayed, which actually reminded me of the old Dad's Garage days, where there was the improv show before the Slam, and Slam was at midnight. And then they would invite people from the improv show to stay for the Puppet Slam.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like, oh yeah, just like the old times. So I think it's been a win-win. The center it's been bringing a community of people who maybe aren't necessarily going to the center shows, and getting them exposed to it and seeing, oh wow, the museum is so cool. Hopefully come back and see it, or see another show. And then, having some marketing support from the center, promoting the Puckin Puppet Show, has been great for us. And and I think that there's definitely an element of prestige that comes with performing on the Center for Puppetry Arts stage, and sure. I think that the performers are excited and honored to be up there.
And a lot of times, the first time those performers get to be on the larger stage, because you guys were on the upstairs stage, not the downstairs stage, right?
Well, we were on the upstairs stage for Halloween, but we were in the downstairs for the holiday show, and we'll be in the downstairs again for Valentine's. And the downstairs it's still a good fit. I mean, it's great to be on the big stage, but puppetry is better when it's intimate, and you're not doing the big spectacle, big stage spectacle stuff that the center is good at.
Yeah. You still there? Hold on. You might have bad connection happening. Whoop-a-doo-doo. Come on back. Come on back. Come on back. There you go. Okay. Yeah, we're good. Okay. So we have 8 minutes left. So I kind of want to give the floor to you, because you have a show to promote, but also let people know how they can get involved with either the puppetry track or the Puckin Puppet Show.
Yeah. So the Puckin Puppet Show, you can follow us on Facebook, and we put out a call for acts for the show, or you can reach out to me directly at puppetry@beaubrownproductions.com, and I'll put you on a mailing list, and I'll send that out, a call for acts. And like I said, the Puckin Puppet Show is open mic, show up at the puppet show, we'll put you on stage, knocking dead kid, get up there and get your 5 minutes. That's very important to me. So that's but the puppetry track at Dragon Con is a whole nother animal. It's 50 hours of puppetry programming inside Dragon Con, inside another convention. In fact, it was the Puppet Slam that started the Dragon Con puppetry track, which I'm pretty sure you were there, right?
No.
You weren't there? Okay.
No.
Raymond was. I
Yes.
thought you may have been in Raymond's show. So yeah, so we convinced Dragon Con to let us do a Puppet Slam, I guess 13 years ago, and we ended up turning away 400 people. Like, we packed the ballroom that we were in. The line went out and around the corner, down the street, literally, like down and around the corner outside. And so I was approached by the president of the convention, Pat Henry, in person after that. And he said, so I heard what you did, this puppet thing. I think you're onto something. How would you feel about creating an entire track of programming? And tracks, Dragon Con programming is divided into tracks, like categories. So puppetry track is puppetry programming. Track is Star Trek. Star Wars track is Star Wars. you know, lit track is literature, space track is space, science track is science, right? And so I said, sure, having no idea what I was getting myself into. It's a volunteer position, and it takes just an insane amount of work, but it's basically an entire puppetry festival, sort of turduckened inside a Comic-Con, like stealth. It's like the Trojan horse of puppetry in geek culture. Because we were able to reach people who would never go to a puppet theater. They would never go see a puppet show, just like leave their house, make plans to go to a puppet show at a puppet theater. But if they're at Dragon Con and they're looking through the programming and they see something that's like the Shadow Cabaret, ooh, what's that? That sounds sexy. And they come and they check out the Shadow Cabaret and they've seen 8 shadow puppet pieces. They never would have seen that in a million years. Definitely not 8 shadow puppet pieces. And and it's definitely a bait and switch. It is a geek culture, pop culture convention. So it's like, hey, the Muppets and Sesame Street and Yoda. You like Yoda, right? How do you like tabletop puppetry? Ooh, exciting, huh? Right? So it's totally the mission of the puppetry track, to engage people who would never go to a puppetry festival, go to a puppet show, and sort of get them interested in puppetry, and ideally go back to wherever they're from, because Dragon Con brings people from all over the world, and then seek out the puppetry in their hometown. That's the mission, right? So
yeah, it's a great mission
getting
too.
Involved in Dragon Con, have a team of volunteers, an amazing team of volunteers, and we're always looking for people to come and help out. You can get in touch with me or through the Dragon Con Puppetry Track Facebook page, or the puppetry@dragoncon.org email address. And so yeah, those are ways to get involved in the puppetry scene here in Atlanta. That's not a Center for Puppetry Arts thing like XPT is. Accessible things to get involved in. And we're always looking for more people. We're always so excited to have that person get up there and do the show for the first time. Like that's always, like Gabby did her first piece at the holiday show, and she won first place, and she was so happy. Everybody was so happy for her. Like that's when the show, I think, really shines. When somebody has the bravery and feels comfortable enough to get up there and do it for the first time. And I mean, that's it. That's the best part, for sure.
Yeah. If someone wants to do, they got kind of a nerdy show idea and they want to be part of the slam at Dragon Con.
The biggest puppet slam in the world?
Yes.
Yes.
There is a bit of a fee to get into that. Is that correct? Yeah.
I mean, you have to, in order to go to the Puppet Slam at Dragon Con, you have to have a Dragon Con membership. So yeah, you have to be going to Dragon Con to participate in any of the Dragon Con puppetry programming. But if you want to perform, then yeah, you have to go to the convention. And performing in the slam does not give you a free ticket to Dragon Con.
Right.
If you want to talk to me about that, I'm happy to do so. But it's quite more involved than just doing a show on the slam.
Yeah,
there's a lot to do.
Well,
but yeah, we have big guests, Sesame Street guests, Muppet guests. Last year we had Marty Krofft from Sid and Marty Krofft. It was icon and legend. and we were so lucky to be able to have him be there with us before he passed away earlier this year. So it was just incredible opportunity. So creating experiences like that, creating those live, exposing people to live puppetry, but then also bringing in legends of the field, all the living Henson children, and puppeteers from Sesame Street and the Muppets and Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, and those are the two missions: celebrate puppetry and pop culture, and then trick people into liking regular puppetry.
You love tricking people.
I love it.
So performance this weekend.
Yes, the
Center
February
Puppetry Arts.
24th. Hopefully everybody will see this before this weekend.
Great.
Okay, yes, February 24th, 10 o'clock, the Valentine's Puckin Puppet Show. My special guest artist is Vanessa Valier from Chicago. She's hilarious. She is 100% one of the funniest performers I've ever seen. I saw her for the first time at the Chicago International Puppetry Festival when I was up there, and I saw one of her acts, and immediately after the show, I walked up, introduced myself, and I said, "You're amazing. I've got to bring you to Atlanta." And this will be, I think, her third or fourth time in Atlanta. She's actually one of the first returning Puckin Puppet Show guests, repeat guests.
Okay.
And then she's been to Dragon Con a couple of times. She's been in the National Slams. So lots of people have seen her, and she's just an absolute riot, just absurd, weird as hell, and just hilarious. If you're ready for some super awkward humor, get ready, because this has got a brand new show. It's going to be really, really super weird, and I think you'll love it, Wade.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, guys, 24th, be there. Center Puppetry Arts. Beau, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for letting everyone know other avenues that they can go down besides XPT to get involved with puppetry. It's a community, and we all need to participate and help it grow. So
100%.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Sure thing. Take care.
Bye. Let's see.